Okay, one of its sensory integration, distributes all the sensory systems. But more importantly, in this context, is it's what literally synchronizes the neural activity of the entire brain. Called thalamic cortical loops, but it's what keeps everything in sync within our brain. So I'm more into what's in sync or not in sync than whether we have a certain amount of a certain brainwave frequency or not. And kind of the current thinking in most of the physiology world are really more into synchronized activity than how much of a certain type of rhythm we have. In terms of performance, anyway. Okay? So if you've got this erratic signal, the chaotic, incoherent rhythm impinging on the thalamus, it basically inhibits the thalamus's ability to synchronize the electrical activity of all the neural systems in the brain. That's why it was called cortical inhibition back in the 1970s. It took a long time to sort all this out, but it's actually really simple once it got all sorted out. If you you're in a coherent state, you now have that rhythm impinging, you're actually facilitating neural synchronization past our normal walking around state. So, okay, what's a practical? Let me ask it this way. So how many of you, maybe one or two in here, have had this experience? Where you're in dialogue, having a conversation, maybe your spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, coworker, and they say or do something that just kind of gets you a little pissed off. Right? And then you, without any kind of conscious awareness, say or do something. In response to that, and about 30 seconds later, you're saying to yourself, oh shit. I can't believe I just said that. Anybody in here ever had that experience?
Never.
Yeah, right. How many of you have done it more than once, maybe around the same issue with the same person? Right? That's cortical inhibition. Okay? This is what's really going on. This is the real physiology of why we do stupid things when we get pissed off or emotionally upset. Okay? Am I making sense here?
Totally.
And it's fast. This is way faster than hormonal and all that stuff. We're talking millisecond scale kind of effects here. Right? So, but if we're able to shift into a coherent state before, that gap between response and doing the dumb thing, we now facilitate cognitive functions, have a lot more options available, more repertoire in our potential choices of how we're going to respond, right? What we're going to say, and so on. So anyway, coherence is causally linked to a lot of things. I'll have some slide on that. I need to say, coherence is not the same as relaxation. In fact, let me go back to this. The pattern of your heart rhythm is independent of heart rate. Now, you can be in either a coherent or incoherent state with training and practice at almost any heart rate. In our military work, in the advanced performance training centers, which Heartmath is used in all the Army advanced performance training centers now, with training, these guys, especially in the special forces, can be in these coherent states with heart rates well over 120. On the other hand, you can be in a totally incoherent state with a low heart rate, physiologically relaxed, right? Still training like crazy. Not that anybody's ever done this, but there you are, maybe in the backyard, having a beer or whatever, and thinking about processing that disagreement that went on in the meeting earlier that day. Can't believe they said that. Should have said, damn it, next time we'll say. Nobody's ever done that either, right? Never, yeah, right. Get the point, right, though? So coherence and relaxation are fundamentally different concepts and states. Relaxation's a good skill. I'm not down on relaxation, just want you to understand it. There are certain times we need to be activated. High heart rates, athletics, right? Police, law enforcement, military, business meetings, right? You want a high heart rate, but you also want to be composed and coherent, in charge of yourself, ability to really self-regulate, make better decisions, right? Okay. So I'm going to skip that. So a lot of studies, independent studies, have now verified what I just said. I won't belabor that. But long-term, practicing coherent skills increases short and long-term memory, ability to maintain our focus, awareness, attention, those kinds of things, reaction times, test scores, so on and so on. So the Heartmath techniques are really about more intelligently self-regulating. And then we, as most of you know, facilitate that with the M-Wave, which measures your HRV and tells you how coherent you are. Also can measure how much of it you've got and so on. So it's really a skill-building device. But the real skill is learning to self-regulate in the moment that you're triggering. And the device facilitates that skill. So it's not about walking around with an M-Wave all the time, am I coherent, am I coherent? No, it's about practicing the skill so that you're training your nervous system to where that coherent state is familiar. So that you can shift into it easier when you are in a challenging situation. The business meeting, golf course, whatever. Make sense? Okay, so there's a number of skills. We don't have time to get into them today. I'll tell you at the end how you can learn hard focus breathing. And it's not just a breathing technique. Ease, quick coherence, freeze frame, which is a really neat decision-making, intuition type tool. Coherent communication, prepping, and so on. A lot of clinical health data. David said talk a little bit about the health stuff. So this is just there's about 80 published studies now in both organizational and clinical settings. Hypertension, blood pressure reduction, asthma, it's almost magical. I hate to use that word, but how effective coherence training is. Heart failure, increased functional capacity, and so on. Okay, Dave said it was okay to stretch you guys a little bit. He did, so I'm warning you. So, talk a little bit about some of the research we've done. I call it the electrophysiology of intuition. And I'm going to tell you ahead of time, this is very rigorous stuff. Measuring brain waves and heart rhythms and skin conductance and all the stuff we do.
So what is that on his head?
These are electrodes for EEG. Okay, that's what's on his head there. So a little preference on intuition. The way I see it, there are three types. The main one, if you read most academic studies and papers and the 35-some books on intuition, almost all of them are limited to and grounded in what's called implicit knowledge or implicit learning. Most of you know what that means, right? No? Okay, implicit learning, implicit knowledge means that we learned something and didn't know we learned it, or learned it and forgot we learned it. Okay, it's just stored away back there in our unconscious. So we encounter a new problem. We don't have a solution. This is a new situation here. So we ponder it. Usually when we're driving to work, not thinking about it, or in the shower, that unconscious processing seeps into the conscious mind, and aha, the insight, the intuition. I'm sure it's very real. I'm sure you've all had that happen, right? That's implicit knowledge, implicit learning. The other type is what I call energetic sensitivity, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And that's the real world, real-time sensitivity that our nervous system has to environmental signals. Whether they're from another human, like empathy, reading somebody else's emotions, magnetic fields. Some people really are sensitive to electromagnetic fields, for example. And there are documented cases of people who can actually feel earthquakes coming. We now know we can measure changes in the Earth's magnetic fields prior to an earthquake. So some people's nervous systems are just tuned into that. It's real. It's measurable. Okay? So that's what I mean by energetic sensitivity. Or have you ever had that sense that somebody's staring at you? You turn around, sure enough. How many of you have had that experience? Okay, energetic sensitivity. Okay? The third type is non-local intuition. These are the type of intuitive insights you just cannot explain through implicit learning, these kinds of things. The mother who knows that her child just got hurt on the other side of the planet, right? Or the baby's in distress and so on. And not just women have this. So I'm not going to go through, I don't have time to go through all the lab data, but what this and a number of studies have now independently shown, this has been duplicated in many labs now, and starting to be published in some of the major journals. Sometimes if a future event is sufficiently threatening, in other words, could cause harm to us or somebody we care about, and it's a key thing here, it has to be emotionally relevant to us. Okay? It causes a change in the heart's activity, and it literally starts with the heart. That pre-alerts us in the brain before the future event takes place. Okay? So I call it intuitive intelligence, and it clearly reacts faster than the mind can perceive. It bypasses that standard cognitive process. Anybody have any kind of personal examples of this, maybe? What I might be talking about? silence.
Hey, Rollin.
Yes.
I've got a great example.
Okay, great.
Let me borrow your mic, though.
One of my buddies, I was actually a groomsman at his wedding, was a long-range patrol guy. Very well trained, did things he can't talk about, Central America kind of guy. And he told me, Dave, I was hiking near a marijuana plantation accidentally. He said, and someone lit me up in their sights. And I said, how the hell did you know that? It was nighttime. And he goes, oh, it's obvious. We just know that. He said, when you're in the field, if someone has a gun pointed at you, like from a distance, he said, you feel a warm flush in your body. He said, I felt it. I haven't felt it in years because he's not in the military anymore. And he was absolutely certain it happened because they actually trained him to do that. So this is an example, very clear. You know, he knew he was in, oh God, there's pot plants here, I should get out of here, but he had, like, I'm in someone's sights, a very precise thing that his neurology was trained for that the rest of us have no clue about. So we know when there are threats, but it's not conscious, cognitive up here, it's down here.
Great example. In law enforcement, military, I asked that question and I can't get the others to shut up. They've got so many examples. It's true. But let me ask it this way. How many of you have been driving your car? Could be a road you've been down 1,000 times before, hometown. For some reason you slowed down before you went around a curve, over a hill, whatever. And sure enough, there was either a police car or a child running out in the street or an accident or something that if you hadn't made that choice unconsciously, you would have probably been in trouble. See hands. How many of you have done that? Okay, there you go. It's another common example of this. We're able to show it in the lab. It's real. In fact, we're looking at the physiology. It's going to be stretchy for some of you, but it's absolute fact. We can predict with about 75%, 80% accuracy what the future event is going to be. Yeah.
How is the information transmitted?
How is the information transmitted? Where does it come from? I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of things we can measure that we don't have the full theoretical understanding. Well, yeah, we have theories of this, but I'm not going to sit here and claim to say we know the how and where. But I can tell you that if we were talking quantum physics, no big deal. Experimentally proven and verified many times over. So it used to be thought that these kind of non-local, if you want to call them, or connected events like this were only true at the below the level of the atom, like the quantum level. We've blown way past that now. I mean, they're showing these effects with whole atoms and groups of atoms now. We just did it physiologically before those experiments were done. The way I got that published in a scientific journal was to say that it looks like the heart and brain have access to a field of information that is not bound by the limits of time and space. Perfectly acceptable for peer-reviewed scientific journals. Okay? We're just showing it. I mean, it's, you know. So basically, what I'm really saying is that the heart especially, has access to, every culture has their word for it, higher self, soul, spirit, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, I knew it was going to stretch some of you, but that's really what is going on. So as we become more coherent, we have more access to that our higher capacities, that intuitive side of ourselves. Make sense? So we're training this. The Special Forces guys love to eat this up. Because basically you can train yourself to have access to more of that part of ourselves, that high-speed intuitive intelligence. I don't have time to go into it, there's two key things. One of them is coherence, being aligned. So if we're going to get, how you apply these techniques is really critical. Because you got to really self-regulate. One, I asked you earlier how many have done the same dumb thing more than once, right? There are many situations that we go into that we know are going to get us triggered in some way or other. You feel anxious about it. How many of you have business meetings? Yeah, does it feel like they take too long? You have too many of them? Yeah. Is there somebody usually in those meetings that you know is going to act a certain way and do a certain thing that's just going to get you... Yes? No?
Yes.
Yes. Why not prep before you go into that meeting? Take a minute, get yourself coherent and composed so that you don't have the same reactions and can make some better choices in that meeting. Make sense? Prep is huge. If you really do it, so a lot of the companies and organizations we work with, board meetings, everything, they start with a 1-minute prep for the meeting. Let's get coherent as a group. Okay? A lot of our business clients are reporting it's cutting meeting times in half. Okay? Literally. Resetting. Life's life. Right? We're going to get upset in traffic or this or that or whatever's going on. But resetting your system as quickly as possible.